Good evening, dear student. Today I would like to discuss one of two issues regarding real security. This will be the first one. It's called Real Security 1. After this you can have a look at the second one, which is unsurprisingly called Real Security 2. So this is just a little recap about the work that we did and which you have worked through, just to touch on some of the most important points. Before we continue, please make sure that you have actually read through the work yourself. If you have not done so yet, pause this, read through the work, and then return to this presentation. I will wait. Okay, for those of you who were away for a little while, welcome back. The rest of you, let's jump right in. Basically, we need to have a little chat about what real security is. Of course, you can go and read the definition in the book, but basically speaking, we can say that the real security in the first place refers to some sort of way in which a person who lends out money or some other sort of thing can have an assurance that if you do not pay back the loan amount or what you are owing to the person, they can get their hands on some sort of remuneration. So that is security. The real part, of course, comes in when it refers to a property right. So, first, it's a protection of a person's investment. It's usually got a focus on a property object. It's normally done in terms of a limited real right. And at the end of the day, the person who obtains this limited real right usually gets a preferential claim in the case of, amongst others, insolvency. So what does this mean, preferential claim? Think about the following situation. If you owe money to a large number of people, let's say you owe the following: 1.5 million. Okay, but at any given stage, you only have cash on hand of 500,000. What does this mean if you are insolvent and there are a number of people who are claiming money from you? This means if every claim has the same value, every person who claims from you will only get 1/3 of the money that you owe them. So this is basically what we would say the person would receive 33 cents out of the rand that you owe him or her. So, how can anyone be in a better situation? Well, it comes back to the fact that we have a limited real right. If someone lends you money and you give that person limited real right to some sort of property object, it means that that person obtains a preferential claim. In other words, let's say that the person loaned you 1 million. Okay? And you gave as collateral. Collateral means this is what you give to the person to guarantee your debt. a property worth 1.2 million. Let's say in total you owe all your debtors 2 million. That is the big total. It means that the person who has the limited real right, if all of your assets are sold, that person gets the full amount that you owe them. More specifically, they will be first in line to receive the proceeds of the property object. So if you used your house as collateral, the house will be sold and the person with the limited real right to the house will receive the money before anyone else gets a cent. This of course puts the person who is lending you anything in a much better position. I want you to closely follow what I'm saying now. Although the chapter says real security, and although it starts out by discussing personal surety, do not confuse the two. Personal surety is not real security. Important. It is not. In other words, personal surety is a personal right. It means it is a contract. So, if the form of surety that anyone has is personal, it means that they have a concurrent claim in terms of insolvency or with a sale of execution. In other words, it's not preferential. I think it should be very obvious to you at this stage that in terms of security rights, a personal surety isn't such a good thing, at least not for someone lending something to someone else. You would rather want to have a real security right. We now move on to the silent hypothecs. Take note that we basically deal with two of these in this part of property law. First is the silent hypothec of the lessor, and here we can always use the following way to write silent hypothec, just SH and lessor, and here we have SH of the credit grantor. Make sure you can differentiate between the two. It should be fairly obvious. The silent hypothec of the lessor is a real security right that the person who rents out property, fixed property, in other words, who rents out a house or a flat or something to that extent, obtains to guarantee his or her payment. In other words, if you do not pay your rent, the lessor is able, by following certain procedures and perfecting the hypothec, to prevent you from selling your property or removing it from the premises. This will make it easier for the lessor to obtain some form of remuneration if the court orders the sheriff to sell your property in execution. The silent hypothec of the credit grantor works pretty much the same. In essence, it allows the credit grantor to basically retain ownership of the property until you have paid for it in full. I would like for you to now take a look at the case of Bloemfontein Municipality versus Jacksons. Of course, first read the case. Go on, do it. I'll be waiting here for you. Okay, so there are a number of questions which I want you to answer. First of these, who are the parties? Write them down. Who is the seller? Who is the buyer? And who is the lessor? I'm not going to tell you who they are. It is important that you do in fact take note of the differences. Make sure that you understand that not all three of these parties, which I've asked you about down here, are mentioned up here. So when you answer a question about this case in the test or the exam, be very certain that you identify the parties correctly. We now move on to another aspect of this case. I want you to think about what the court says about which claim takes preference. Is it the silent hypothetic of the lessor or of the credit grantor? Do you think that the conclusion that the court comes to is fair? And do you think that the application of the court's decision in this case is one that will always be followed? In other words, is there an exception in this case which the court discusses? And what does it say about the application of the hypothec to the property of third parties? In other words, someone else's property. Finally, I want you to take note in which year this case was decided. Go on, take a look. Yes, it was long ago. Why do I underline this? Let me write it. There we go. There's the date. I underline the date. Of course, you have looked it up. It's important because you need to keep this in mind when you are discussing the application of this case. If you are discussing the facts of the case, you cannot rely on legislation that was created in the 2000s. It should seem logical that the court at the beginning of the 20th century would not have been able to make reference to legislation that was created almost 100 years later. It's the little details that really count. See you for the next one.